This conference will now be recorded.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to this week's episode of Digital Law News. This is brought to you by Digital Law and produced by Anson Evaluate. So just for those who don't know, Digital Law is a UK-based law firm, and we specialise in anything to do with digital law, so things to do with technology matters, data protection and social media law as well. So I'll just pass over to Peter to give you an introduction before we get started with today's stories.
Thank you very much indeed, Laura. And yeah, we are covering everything on that intersection between law and technology. And my name is Peter Rudd. I'm the Solicitor and Managing Director of Digital Law, and we've got some fascinating stories to cover this week, including the return of social media libel. It's a rare beast, but it's come back, and we've got a juicy story to look at. So I'll hand back to you.
Thanks, Peter. So yeah, that's the one we're going to be starting with today. Sorry, I can't get my notes up. So yeah, this is a case against sorry, there we go. So yeah, this is a case against the TV doctor Christian Jessen against Arlene Foster. So she basically brought a case against Christian Jessen about a tweet that Christian Jessen wrote, basically alleging that she'd had an affair. So this has gone to court, and the High Court have awarded Arlene sum of damages of £125,000, and then also asked Christian to pay her expenses as well, which has come to £300,000, bringing it to a total of £425,000, obviously not including any of Christian's fees on top of that. But it is said that this may be appealed because it is fairly high and not very common to be awarded indemnity as well. So yeah, we'll see if anything does come of that.
Indeed, this is a fascinating case and illustrates that whatever you say on social media, like if you were to say it in the real world, or to have it, you know, if you were to make comments in a newspaper or a magazine, it is subject to the same laws of libel. And in this instance, you know, if you were to stand on a street corner with a megaphone and make these allegations, there would be repercussions. And it turns out that in the same way that those repercussions apply on Twitter. There have been high-profile cases in the past where individuals have been sued for the things they've said on Twitter. So famously, the former Speaker of the British Parliament, John Bercow, his wife, Sally Bercow, was sued by the Lord Irvine, who was a former treasurer of the Conservative Party and who was falsely associated in 2012 with some criminal allegations that proved to be totally unfounded. And he decided to go after anyone on Twitter who had either commented about those allegations or had even retweeted anything. And Sally Bercow had sent a tweet saying, "Why is Lord Irvine trending?" And then sort of the innocent face emoji, and that was enough to land her with ending up having to make a payment of £60,000 to Lord Irvine. There have been other cases as well, but they've become a little bit dated, and it's interesting that this has now happened in 2021. It is a very large sum of money that has been awarded. There is, I'm told, I mean, this is under the law in Northern Ireland, don't forget. The UK has its different jurisdictions, so Scotland and Northern Ireland have their own separate legal systems. And there is the possibility that this sum might be reduced upon appeal because it is a very large sum. Yeah. However, I think we also need to bear in mind the fact that Christian Jessen is already saying, "Oh, this is terrible. How am I going to pay this? It's going to make me bankrupt." He started a crowdfunding page, which has so far, I think, received less than £10,000 in donations, but has also received a lot of comments on social media from people saying, "You got yourself into this problem, so you need to pay your way out of it." And also, several news reports have suggested that he's got several properties in the UK that are worth more than £1 million. So he's got assets that he may have to dispose of in order to meet the requirements of this award. I think it's also worth bearing in mind that what he had alleged with regards to Arlene Foster's private life was, you know, very often allegations might be made about high-profile public figures, but in this instance, you're talking about a high-profile public figure who was First Minister in Northern Ireland, who is a devout Christian and is First Minister of a province where, due to their religious history, issues around law and morality are taken very seriously. And I'm afraid in this instance, Arlene Foster was not willing to sort of let this lie, and hence the response that has followed. And I think you actually highlighted, Laura, the judgment of the judge actually made the point that these were very hurtful allegations, and that given Arlene Foster's very public role, they caused great offence, and hence that is reflected in the sum that's been awarded.
Yeah, absolutely. The judge made a statement. I think it was when he was announcing the amount and his justification for the large amount. Because I know this is a higher in terms of the price of damages that he is paying to Arlene, in terms of like other libel cases in the past, and that's on the basis of which he probably will appeal or can appeal. But they did state that this is so high for the damages because it is grossly defamatory, and because of all them reasons, because she is a devoted Christian, she is in a party that really take this stuff seriously, and it could affect her both her career and her personal life as well. So I think that's why the judge has gone so high on that, based on those points.
Yes, I think you're absolutely right. And I mean, it's also important to look at the wider context here as well. I mean, Arlene Foster has actually is currently in the process of stepping down as First Minister of Northern Ireland, and a new First Minister will be appointed in due course. And she's also resigned as leader of her party, the Democratic Unionist Party, the DUP. And we know from advising clients that taking part in rigorous litigation like this is inherently stressful for all parties involved, and I think it is revealing that at the same time that Arlene Foster's grip on power has gradually been reduced and she's faced a lot of pressures in her role as First Minister and leader of her party, at the same time that has been going on, she's also been facing this ongoing litigation. So has clearly gone through quite a lot there. I don't think, to be honest, it's entirely coincidental that she's run out of road in terms of the leadership of her party at the same time as having to deal with this. I think it will have distracted her from the day job inevitably, given the size and scale of this libel litigation that she's embarked on.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to our next story then. So this is in regards to the Massachusetts ferry firm in a latest cyber ransomware attack. So Massachusetts ferry firm were the latest victim, and this comes after sorry, Peter, do you have your notes there? What the firm, because it's the largest meat distributor, they've actually been attacked as well by Russia.
That's quite right, yes. So there's been a substantial, I think it's one of the world's largest meat packing and production organisations has also been compromised. And it is interesting that I think when we think of infrastructure being affected in ransomware attacks and by being vulnerable to hackers, we tend to think of things like electricity grids and the water supply as bits of critical national infrastructure. But in this instance, you know, this ferry from Massachusetts, that takes down a significant piece of infrastructure as well that people would rely on ordinarily. And then, given our consumer habits now, where people tend to only have enough food for a couple of days in the house, it's not difficult to imagine the societal pressures that are then increased when meat suddenly isn't available on supermarket shelves and in freezers. And this has highlighted that a lot of those sorts of plants, which of course have had to stay functioning throughout the pandemic, and indeed where our offices are located in South Yorkshire, there are a high volume of those sorts of facilities and people engaged in working in them. And of course, very often you're working in the cold, where you've got lots of people all working together, and it's, you know, I think we tend to think of those who have had to work on continually in the pandemic as being those in the public sector, but in this instance, it's the private sector, those ensuring that there is still food available on the table and in the supermarkets is sometimes overlooked. So I think that shows really the in that instance, even a pandemic hasn't been able to take down those sorts of facilities yet. The ransomware hackers have, and it is a timely reminder that when we are looking at critical national infrastructure and its vulnerability to hackers, we actually have to cast that net very wide to think of the food supply, to think as well as things like the water supply, the power supply, and the other things that we kind of take for granted, particularly in Western society, but we tend to sort of notice very, very quickly when they are not there in the way that we've become accustomed to.
Absolutely. So that takes us very nicely on to our next story. And this is in relation to some NCIS guidance that's come out about what board members should be thinking about when it comes to cybersecurity and ransomware. So basically, this is some guidance that's come from the NCSC, and it's basically saying that the cybersecurity is a board level responsibility and not something that should be kind of up to like lower levels of staff to kind of decide the decisions on and things like that. So the key takeaway from this piece of guidance was 5 questions that all boards should be asking themselves. So the first question is, as an organisation and board members, how do we know an incident has occurred? So this is just looking at things to look out for as to how you would basically figure out that incident has occurred, so then you know you have to act on it. The second is, what measures do we take to minimise the damage an attacker could do inside our network? The third is, do we have an incident management plan for cyber incidents, and how do we ensure that is effective? The fourth is, does our incident management plan meet the particular challenges of ransomware attacks? And finally, how is data backed up, and are we confident that these backups would remain unaffected by a ransomware infection?
Yes, 5 very important questions that any organisation needs to ask itself when it comes to its preparedness. And I think this is a really practical step by the NCSC to produce this guidance, because I think when these conversations tend to come up in boards, they very often come up when the board might come around to its regular review of the risk register, and on there it might find cybersecurity or data protection. A particular bugbear of mine is when I find that boards have lumped them both together and said, oh, data protection and cybersecurity, that's the same thing, and we have rated it as this following level of risk. When that isn't properly assessing the risk as it properly should be looked at. Don't forget, of course, that data protection only applies to personal data. Cyber can apply to your commercial, confidential business operations and records and developments and research. Might be no personal developments involved in that, but it's still cyber. And of course, cyber can also take your entire business offline, as we've just talked about with the last story. So I think these are practical questions that board members can ask. You don't have to have a complex knowledge of IT systems and how your servers operate and what the sort of fail safes are, and you don't need to be fully up to speed on, if your IT director is saying, well, these are the issues we've got with our legacy systems and this is our replacement plan and procurement. You don't need to know about any of that, because these 5 questions are simply questions that boards have to ask in these discussions and be able to get a clear, workable answer. Hence, how do we know that we are reporting these things? That's important so you can comply with statutory reporting obligations if there is personal data involved. What are you going to do if there is an attack to minimise damage? What's your plan the minute you find there has been a hack? How is it backed up? These are just practical questions that boards need to ask, rather than just hiving off the responsibility to thinking, oh, that's the compliance officer's problem, or oh, that's the IT department or IT director's problem. These are collective board responsibilities, and boards as a whole need to have these discussions. So I think even if you are the chair of a board and you're thinking, how do we raise this? I think these are the 5 questions that you need to be asking when having these discussions, and then staying on top of those questions and pursuing at future meetings, that you get full, detailed, workable, productive answers that come back. And then the fact that you've had those discussions at board level is a method of then demonstrating compliance to the regulator, when you can say, look at these detailed minutes of our discussions where we were asking these questions, seeking answers, and doing everything that we could have been reasonably expected to do as a board of this organisation, with our resources and level of resources available to us. So, and the only other thing as well is I'd compare this with the story we looked at last week, Laura, of the NCSC providing a tool for children to look at compliance as well. Let's not draw any analogies between the technical skills of the children in question and the technical skills of the board members. Probably fairly similar, if we're being brutally honest. But the point the point is that the NCSC, I think, is doing a good job here of thinking about its core audience of board members and people in the private sector, as well as future users of technology and amongst the public as well. So really good that the NCSC is still reviewing these and churning out regular updated guidance throughout the pandemic, and now as the economy goes into a bit of a boom as well, it's continuing to do the same thing.
Yeah, as well, I think that's something that NCSC are really good at. They kind of cover all bases in terms of giving guidance to the everyday public, like the story last week with the game for the children, as well as the one for protecting yourself when you're watching things online in terms of like football and everything, and then going back to the other side of things with the like exercise in the box and specific guidance towards board members and that. So it kind of covers all bases there. So it's a good resource for anyone to use, really.
It is, and I think the other good thing about it is that it is so accessible. It is written without it does, while they don't use sort of technical jargon and things that can put you off. I mean, anyone who's ever gone along to a conference of IT or technical compliance professionals knows that those conversations are not accessible. It is very difficult to understand exactly what's being said if you're an expert, let alone if you are a sort of technically agnostic and walk in there and think, wow, I'm only understanding every fourth or fifth word. You know, the NCSC stuff isn't like that. It is accessible, it's in clear, plain English, and it is accessible to anyone. You don't have to have that sort of technical skill. But what it does is it does that while not coming across as being patronising either. And that's a really difficult thing to do, and I think they actually do it very, very well. So I think there's a reason why we keep on referring to NCSC guidance on this news update that we do, and I think I encourage everyone to regularly go and take a look at ncsc.gov.uk as a result, and use the free resources that are there. We are paying for them as UK taxpayers after all.
Yeah, absolutely. So moving on to our next story for today then. So this is in regards to a Conservative party that have been fined £10,000 for sending emails to people who simply just didn't want them. So this was during the campaign in 2019 when Boris Johnson became the party leader and the Prime Minister. So Tories were sending basically emails out to over 1 million people, I think. It was quite a large number of people. They were sending these emails to, including the Brexit priorities in terms of what they're going to do with the NHS, their ideas for policing numbers, and basically the emails were urging all recipients to join the party and support them, basically. But out of these emails, it was found that 51 of those were actually sent to people who had unsubscribed from receiving these marketing emails. But because the Conservative Party actually switched email provider during the campaign, they didn't notice or didn't take on board the fact that 51 people had unsubscribed. So this is where the fine came in. So they were fined £10,000, and I believe it was under the Privacy and Electronic Communications Regulation, like the fines that we've discussed recently. So yeah, quite a big fine for the Conservative Party, but not absolutely massive, but big in comparison to how many emails were actually sent.
Indeed, that's a very comprehensive coverage of that, Laura, because I think really important here to realise that this isn't a fine under GDPR; it's under Privacy and Electronic Communications regs. And I mean, I remember hearing the Information Commissioner Elizabeth Denham speaking at an event in 2018 when GDPR came in, and she said the ICO as a whole is receiving loads of questions from businesses saying, what should we be doing with our marketing emails? And her answer to that was always, that's actually a matter for the PECA regs, nothing to do with GDPR, or certainly it will be enforced under PECA. And this is illustrating the point. In this instance, we've got people who have, I think, tried to unsubscribe to say, I don't wish to receive this communication. And even though it's 51 emails, 51 such cases, I think that the point is that when you are sending out millions of emails during a election campaign, there is the likelihood that even if only a very, very small percentage of them are not being properly tracked, as happened in this due to the switching over of email systems, then some are going to fall through the cracks. And even though it was probably a fraction of a percent of the number of emails that were sent out that had people then saying, actually, I'd like to unsubscribe, and then they failed to track those unsubscribe responses, that's then led directly to this enforcement. I think the other thing to bear in mind as well is that, all the political parties are doing this. Everyone from the Lib Dems to Labour to the Greens are sending out huge volumes of email. And I think this is a timely reminder to say, just be thinking about the fact that people still have their rights to say, I wish to unsubscribe and not receive anything anymore, and that where that is not properly tracked and logged and put into practice, then there will be consequences. And given how parties are, they do find it difficult to raise funds. This isn't like America, where you can raise millions of dollars through online campaigning because there is a culture of public giving in the way that there is not in the UK. When you still get a fine of £10,000, that's going to have been a fairly significant hit when you think, well, that's money that we would have otherwise spent on campaigning. So I think it's quite a significant shot across the bows from the ICO to all of the political parties, large and small, to make the point that, look, your obligations with regards to how you use your data are just as severe as every other organisation, and we will carry out enforcement against you if you are not complying with the spirit and practice of the regulations in place.
Yeah, absolutely. So that leads us on to our final story for today. So this is in regards to cryptocurrency and firms falling short of new regulations. So this was a story that was on the Times, and this is saying that many cryptocurrency firms are falling short to meet rules aimed to tackling money laundering. So the FCA, so the Financial Conduct Authority, have said that more than 50 companies have scrapped their applications to register with the watchdog, meaning that they will be required to put a halt to their business. Many have also withdrew their applications as well after falling short of watchdog's anti-laundering standards. So this is just a warning that it is likely to fuel concerns among global regulations that digital assets such as Bitcoin and other cryptocurrency are open to illicit activity.
Indeed. Thanks for that, Laura. I think this is a really important story because it highlights the work that is taking place being led by the regulators, which is reflecting the current, I think, stance on economic crime being taken by the UK government. I think there has been a perception, which might not be true in reality, but certainly a perception, that there is a comparatively large amount of money laundering that's been taking place in the UK. You know, I think certain individuals and regimes around the world have thought, you can take your ill-gotten gains and invest in the London property market, or invest in the city, in investments in the city, and then draw your cash out and receive a cleared check, which you can then use to buy your yacht, or your volcanic super lair somewhere. And the point is that therefore the regulations around preventing money laundering are increasing. Regrettably, this means that, as you'll know, Laura, we even have to jump through hoops as a law firm when we onboard our clients, and we've had to think about our procedures when, for example, all of our clients now, we only meet through video, as opposed to actually meeting them face to face. So there are certain things we have to do to prove that clients are who they say they are, and that is part of the same anti-money laundering regime that we are looking at here. And in this instance, it is those anti-money laundering rules that, if in effect, are leading to greater regulation of the cryptocurrency scene, where there is very little active regulation for cryptocurrency. It's not the same as, you know, if you were to invest in the euro or pound sterling or the dollar on the financial markets. You know, those are currencies that have central banks behind them and clear policy making and decision making, whereas a cryptocurrency, what's behind that? A distributed ledger system. So it is, you know, a blockchain. So there's not the same level of control and regulation behind cryptocurrency, and they are inherently high risk investments as a result. You know, you might be able to make huge amounts of money, but you can also lose large amounts of money, and this is one of the reasons why their value is fluctuating so massively at the moment. And in this instance, the FCA is finding that its anti-money laundering measures are having a significant impact on the cryptocurrency sector. These 50 companies saying we're actually going to scrap our applications to register with the FCA because we can't actually meet the anti-money laundering requirements. And that says a lot. So it's a timely reminder of the caution, the dangers of investing in cryptocurrency. There does appear to be quite potentially a lot of activity that could be construed as being money laundering taking place on those platforms, and clearly these organisations are unable to pass the requirements that the FCA is setting out when it comes to tackling money laundering. And it is also basically a lesson to say that you can potentially make big amounts of money from cryptocurrency trading, but you can also lose large amounts, and there is not the regulatory protection there that you will find in other more traditional sources of investment, even that the roulette wheel that appears to be the financial investment market in London and New York. So a small story with, I think, big implications there. And it will be interesting to see if perhaps some cryptocurrencies may voluntarily go down the path of trying to work with regulators and have greater compliance in this field to actually give greater confidence to their investors, perhaps. Who knows? But an interesting story to speak on, to finish on there nonetheless.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's everything we have time for today. So we just want to give our listeners a special a reminder of our special offer that we've got on at the minute. So this is our GDPR compliance manual for legal practices. It is down to £99 from £195, so around 50% off. This is available in hard copy and digital copy as well. Just have to pay an extra £5 for postage and packaging. So I'll just hand over to you, Peter, to give a little bit more information about it.
Indeed, thank you, Laura. So this is our GDPR compliance manual for law firms that gives you all the forms and templates and checklists to help you with your compliance. GDPR is great at telling you what standards you need to be at, but doesn't tell you how to actually achieve those standards. And this provides you with practical guidance and tools to do that. This is indeed a manual available electronically and in hard copy, and indeed a great introductory price there. So please do let us know if you'd like a copy.
Yeah, absolutely. You can just send us an email to admin@digitallawyuk.com. Just a big thank you as well for Anson Evaluate for helping us produce this webinar. So Anson Evaluate are a training, webinar and consultancy service firm, and they help other businesses to set up their webinars, get some training for the staff, and things like that as well. So if anyone is interested in setting up a new webinar, a new podcast, or just getting some training for your staff in terms of cybersecurity, data protection, or anything in that field, just give them an email and admin@ansonevaluate.com, and they'll be able to get back to you.
Indeed. So if you'd like your own podcast or your own webinar, so you can reach a greater audience, please do get in touch with Anson Evaluate. And also a quick request for information and feedback from our listeners. We're working on a social media law update webinar, Social Media Law 2021. Details of that will be out very, very shortly, and it will reflect a greater analysis of things like the Arlene Foster and Christian Jessen case that we've talked about today, and also look back at some previous issues around social media law, and that will be coming out very soon. But we are now in the process of putting together our calendar of CPD training for the rest of the year. So if you are keen for us to focus on and produce a webinar in a particular area, now is the time to let us know. What would you like to hear? So if you're keen to hear about cybersecurity risks and compliance, if you are interested in hearing about international data transfers, the implications of Brexit, regulation of tech in the EU through things like the European Digital Services Act package, or the regulation of the Competition and Markets Authority in the UK and how that's changing. You know, all of these things and all these sorts of things that we cover in our regular news updates. We're now putting together the webinars, but if there's a particular area you'd like to hear from in depth that you would be interested in joining a webinar on, as I say, now is the time to let us know, and we can reflect that in our forthcoming calendar of training. So thank you very much, and please do give us any feedback on admin@digitallawuk.com to let us know your thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So yeah, just a reminder that any feedback is welcome on that as well. So just a reminder that this podcast is available on demand to watch. It is available on Spotify, through our YouTube channel and other podcast channels as well. So thank you for listening, and we hope to see you back next week for another episode.